Sometimes our problems are such that there's no solution in sight. If we are not the ones who created the problem, we can find ourselves at a dead end trying to solve it. There may be factors that are beyond our control or people whose decisions and actions determine the outcome. At such times, it is important to remember that the path we chose to find a solution is as important as the solution itself. Andy Stanley, who is a pastor of North Point Community Church in Atlanta, said, "Stop looking for solutions to problems and start looking for the right path." Problems can be opportunities to learn to depend on God. Nehemiah led the people of Judah to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem in 446 BC. Opposition goes with the territory of being a leader. Nehemiah was no exception, and he had his fair share of opposition from many quarters. He faced problems which were not within his control. Some of these problems were created by people with malicious intent. But he refused to buckle under pressure. He continued to do his work, and he remained focused on his goals. Even though Nehemiah was a man of action, his prayer life was not neglected. He blended practicality and spirituality in order to solve the problems that he faced. What a great example of a leader he is to us. He knew that action is necessary for results, but action backed by prayer guarantees success. When his enemies plotted against him, Nehemiah realized that this was not a problem that he could solve in his own strength. Instead, he sought God's help in dealing with it. Nehemiah prayed practical prayers that showed reliance on God while he kept on his task. So if we rely on God when we face problems, then we'll have the ability to press on with our work and to reach our goals. Now today we are going to start learning how to code. To some, this will come quite easily, but to others, this is going to be a challenging unit. And when it feels difficult, just remember to call on God to help you through it. If God can save people miraculously in battles, then he can definitely help you with a little computer code. So today we are going to start learning how to code. So I am going to be giving you a little coding 101 lesson that will give you absolutely everything you need to know in order to complete your software engineering project. And remember that you've already been working in Swift Playgrounds. You should already have it downloaded. You should have already started Learn to Code 1, and we're going to take it from there. So, just like how you have a little character in Learn to Code 1 that moves around in the puzzle world and tries to collect the gems or goes through the portals or whatever it may be, you are going to be creating your very own puzzle world. So you'll be able to create walls and stairs and all these different things to create a little obstacle course for the character to collect the gems. So it's going to use the same concepts that you're learning in Learn to Code 1, but it's going to be a little bit different. So your group is going to be tasked with creating a puzzle world. So you'll actually have to build out the puzzle world. And then it will also need to be solved, meaning that the character will have to move through and collect all of the gems. We'll talk about more of the details for the actual project and any practice that we're going to do later, but we're going to get things set up today. So you should be following along on your iPads as we go. So you should have Swift Playgrounds open right now so that we can make sure that we're getting everything set up to be able to create the puzzle worlds. So when you open Swift Playgrounds, you should have a screen that looks kind of like this. Yours may look a little bit different because you can see that I have all these puzzle worlds here open in my playgrounds, and you won't have those puzzle worlds open yet, and that's okay. But you should have a screen that looks kind of like this. So if you haven't opened Swift Playgrounds yet, I encourage you to do that now so that you don't fall behind as we start to go through the different steps to set up our puzzle world project. You are going to see at the bottom that there is a place to click on More Playgrounds. This is going to give you things well beyond Learn to Code 1. It gives you other games that you can play, and we're going to look at something specifically in there. So if you happen to see Puzzle World at the bottom, like I have highlighted here in orange, then you can click on that. You may also need to click the See All button in order to find the puzzle world there. So once we open the puzzle world, it is going to open into something like this. Okay, and so what we're going to do is we are going to get to know the puzzle world a little bit, what the different spaces are when we're looking at our puzzle world, etc. So I am going to wait just one moment to make sure that absolutely everyone has their puzzle world pulled up so that we can all be on the same page at the same time. So at this point, your teacher can pause the video to make sure that all puzzle worlds are pulled up, and then we can continue. So now that we have the whole puzzle world pulled up together, we are going to go through what the puzzle world looks like and what the different parts are. So on the right-hand side is going to be right now your empty puzzle world. This is going to be where, as you add code to your puzzle world, as you create it, this is where you're going to see it come to life. On the left-hand side is going to be where you have your actual code. So this is where we're going to be building the puzzle world. On the bottom right, you can see where it says Run My Code. So just like in Learn to Code 1, Run My Code is going to run whatever code you have written, and it is going to produce on the right-hand side here in the puzzle world. You can also click on this little timer guy on the left, and that is going to allow you to do different things in terms of how fast your code is running. I normally recommend running fastest, especially because if we have a lot of code that we have to run through, you're placing a lot of blocks, a lot of stairs, a lot of gems, then we'll want to run it faster. If we're trying to see where we're going wrong, then maybe we want to step through my code so that you can see and it will follow along on the left-hand side so you can see exactly what each line of your code is doing. Next, on the left-hand side, within our code, you can see that we have two different tabs. One is the main tab. The main tab is going to be where you are going to be putting all of your code. The other one is the shared code. We are going to have to make some edits to the shared code. Basically, I've already given you some things that will be helpful for you. And once we make the edits to the shared code, then you will only need to be in the main code from there on out. All right, so in your shared code, you should delete absolutely everything that you have in there. So your shared code should be completely empty. It should have nothing that was in there before. And then you are going to go to Canvas, and we are in Unit 3 for this week. You will find 3.4 Coding Basics, and in big bold letters, you will see the shared code. You're going to click on that, and you should copy everything that pops up. So it will look exactly like it does here on the screen. So you'll see this shared code here. Then you're just going to click and select all of it, copy it, and then you're going to paste it into the shared code tab of your puzzle world. So at the end, your puzzle world should look like this with your shared code, and it should only have exactly what I've given you. Once you have gotten your shared code, you should go to your main tab, the one on the left, and you should delete everything except for the let portal statement. So you'll delete everything except for the let portal statement. So the let portal you can see is highlighted down here, and this is what it looks like. The whole idea is this box is actually a really nice way to pick out the color, and so we want to keep that to use later. And so we want to delete everything except for that one statement. So this is what your puzzle world should look like after you've done that. So your main tab should only have the let portal statement, and your shared code should only have what I have given you on Canvas. So your teacher is going to pause the video before we keep going just to make sure that everyone has their main tab and their shared tab exactly the way that they're supposed to look. Now that you have everything set up, we are going to get started with learning some coding basics. And we're going to start off really simple. So when we have a grid like you see here, coding normally works on a grid-based system. We have columns and rows. So we have the left to right ones, the horizontal ones, and we also have the up and down ones, the vertical ones. It's important that we know that the rows are horizontal. They go left to right. and the columns are up and down. It'll actually go from bottom to top, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So knowing your rows and columns is really, really important to this Puzzle World project that we're going to be doing. So 0 always starts in the bottom left corner. So think of it just like a very basic graphing grid. You would have 0 at the bottom left-hand corner. But what's important to remember is that we start with 0, not with 1. So that box would be 0, 0. So then we're going to count up for our rows and count over for our columns. So we have 0 through 9 for all of our rows, and then we have 0 through 9 for all of our columns. And this looks pretty familiar to you guys. Like, you guys know what a grid looks like. You know how to do some basic graphing of points and things like that. But what I want you to think about is how many rows are there and how many columns are there. So we're going 0 through 9. So how many rows do we have and how many columns do we have? Okay, so if you said that we have 9 rows and 9 columns, you'd be wrong. So because we're actually starting with 0, this is a 10 by 10 square. And so we have 10 rows and we have 10 columns. And that's why it's really important to remember that we start with 0 and not with 1. So what I want to do is just kind of practice, making sure that we know how to kind of plot points, because that is going to kind of be the foundation for how we create the puzzle world. So the first question is, where is column 3, row 9? Your teacher's going to pause the video and ask for a volunteer to show us where column 3, row 9 is. Hopefully you said right here where the blue star is. That is column 3, row 9. So the next one is, where is column 8, row 2? Let's get a volunteer to do column 8, row 2. The smiley face is at column 8, row 2, so hopefully you were right for that one. What about column 0, row 1? Where would we put the blue cloud? That would be right there. We're in column 0, row 1. What about column 6, row 0? Where would we put the heart? Right on top of the 6, because that's our 0 row and we're in column 6. So then when we take this and we look at our puzzle world, we are also looking at a grid, and it's also going to go from 0 to 9 and 0 to 9. And so we could do the same exact thing, the same exercise we just did in terms of placing things on our puzzle world is going to be using the columns and rows, just like we just did in our example. So what's really important for you to know is that the shared code gives you a bunch of functions that are supposed to help you, but you should not change them or edit them whatsoever. So everything that the teacher has given you, you should leave it exactly as it is, because if you break it, then you're just going to have to go back in and you're going to have to copy the shared code from Canvas all over again and put it back in there. Your teacher has given it to you to help you, but you don't need to make any changes. So the only changes you should make are in your main tab. So if we look at some of the functions that the teacher has given you, we can see a function that's called place block. Now, what do you think this function does? It places a block. So to place a block, you use a function, and then you just have to tell where you want it on your grid. So what I want you guys to do is, in your main tab of your puzzle world, right under the let portal statement, you should write place block, left parenthesis, column colon 4, comma row colon 8, right parenthesis. And then do the same thing for the other line as well. So make sure that you try to get 2 blocks to appear on your puzzle world, and I'll give you just a moment to complete that. Okay, so now that you've got that into your main code, you can push run this code on the right side, or run my code on the right hand side, and you should get blocks that appear here, column 4, row 8, and also column 6, row 6. So you should get 2 blocks that appear on your puzzle world. And you just did that. You just coded it. And so it should be really that easy. And it's not going to get a lot more difficult than this as we go. But what's really important is that you're able to know and put the column and the row number in there. And that you have to make sure that you type it out exactly as you see it. In fact, if you are in your main tab and you start typing place block, you should see that it comes up as a little option down below to click on place block. So let me show you how that works. So if I start typing place down here, you'll see at the very bottom, right above your keyboard, you get all of these options to show up. So I'm going to click place block. And what it does is it automatically highlights int, which just means an integer, which is like a whole number. And we just need to then fill that in. So if I want to place at column 4, and then I can go up and I can click on this int and replace it with 8, then I can run my code and it will place the block. This is placing our character, but we're going to get to that in just a second. So I'll place my block there at column 4, row 8. So what's really nice about this is that it pops it up for you so that then you don't have to type out the whole thing, and then you're less likely to mistype something. So then we can say column 6, and then I'll click on this one and put row 6. And it's really important that it looks exactly like this, because if you move even a comma or a colon, or you leave the word int in there, then it's not going to work. So it's really important that your code looks exactly like this if you want to get those 2 blocks. The other thing that's really important to remember is that it is case sensitive, meaning that the computer knows whether you typed an uppercase B or a lowercase b. It knows whether you have used capitals or lowercase letters, which means that you can see in this example here at the bottom, place block with a lowercase b is not the same as place block with an uppercase b. So something as simple as that can throw off your code, and the computer, your iPad, will say that it doesn't work, that the code cannot run just because you missed a capital letter. So as long as you click on, like if you type PLA and then you click on the block, just like I showed you to do, then you shouldn't have this problem, okay? But just so you know that there are some really finicky things where if you don't do it exactly right, it won't work. All right, so at this time, you can clear everything out of your main tab except for the let portal statement. And if you accidentally delete that, it won't be the end of the world, but it's just easier if you keep it in there for later. So I want you to start with a completely blank main tab and then follow the instructions here to place 1 block, 1 stair, and 1 gem. And when you push run my code, you should get this output here on the right. So your puzzle world, your Swift Playground, should look exactly like this screenshot here. It should have the let portal in the main tab, and it should have place block, place stair, place gem at column 5, and then the appropriate row. And so make sure it looks exactly like that. If you get a little red dot up here, that means that your code won't run, and that's because you either have misspelled a word or you used a lowercase or an uppercase when you weren't supposed to, you forgot a comma, it could be anything really simple. So that's why I recommend typing PLA, and then when it comes up down here at the bottom, you just click on it so that you can then just insert your column and your row. And then when you push run my code, you should get it to look exactly like this. So your teacher's going to give you just a minute to make sure that you are all able to get a puzzle world that looks like this. So now that you guys are becoming pros on building puzzle worlds by placing blocks, placing stairs, and placing gems, we're going to introduce a feature of code that allows us to do things a little bit easier. So we're going to do what is called a for loop. And this is because it starts with the word for. So basically what a for loop does is it will repeat an action multiple times. So I want you to make your code look exactly like mine does here. and it should produce the same exact output that we just saw, but now this time you're using a for loop. If you start typing for, you will see that at the very bottom, just like when we saw place stair, place block, place gem, you'll see that the for option pops up, and then we'll be able to fill it in from there. So your teacher will walk around to make sure that everyone's following along, but make your code look exactly like this one does, and hopefully you get the same exact output, except this time you're using a for loop. Alright, so now that you have used a for loop, let's talk a little bit about each piece of it so that you understand exactly how to use them in the future. So for loops are supposed to make your life a lot easier. And when you click on the for function, like we talked about, at the bottom, it will pull up the formatting for you. And so basically what it does is it just repeats whatever functions you put inside of the loop, in between the curly brackets. And so let's talk about the different aspects of the for loop. When we have the I, for I in one ... number, you can click on I and it will highlight in blue, and you can put any single word you want in there. So the last example, I put height because I wanted there to be 2 blocks on top of each other, so it would have a height of 2. So that's why I use the word height. If I had left it as an I, it still would have worked. But when I put height, then I know what I'm trying to do. So it's really helpful to put what you want in that space. The next part is the one ... number. This tells you what you want it to cycle through. So if we want a height of 2, then we want it to cycle through twice. And so we do 1 ... 2, because it would say the height of 1, and then it always goes up by integers. And so then it would say, okay, now I'm going to do the same thing in the code for a second time. If we wanted it to be a height of 3, we would put 1 ... 3. The middle part in between the curly Q brackets is where the code goes. You do not need to have the word code. In fact, you should click on it so it gets blue, and that's where you can put any of the functions that you want to be repeated. In our example, we wanted 2 blocks stacked on top of each other, so we placed blocks in the same column in the same row, but because we have it in a for loop, it was going to do it 2 times. Okay? You should notice how when we have the code, it's a little bit indented, so it's like a little bit farther over from where we typed the for. This tells the computer that we are still inside the loop. So this is why it's really important that you use the for formatting that pops up at the bottom, so that then you can just click on all of these different pieces and fill in whatever you need. The last thing that's really important are the curly Q brackets. These tell you where your code starts and ends, and you have to have both start and end brackets. If you accidentally delete this bracket down here at the end, then you're going to get a red dot that says your code will not run. So you have to have both brackets, which is why I really recommend using the formatting that pops up at the bottom rather than trying to type out all of this formatting yourself. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at our example that we were working with before. In your main tab, you should still have exactly what we see here, which is the 2 stair level and gem puzzle world. This should be what you already have gotten to run, so this is what it should look like. Let's take a look at the place stair. We can see that they're placing the stair at the same column number 5. And the only thing that's changing in this code is the row number, which is row numbers 4 and 5. So what we can actually do is we can delete those lines of code and replace them with another for loop. This time we want to say for row, because what's going to be changing is we're not adding a height, but we're going to be putting in a row, and we want the row to be equal to 4 and then to 5. And then in between our curly Q brackets, we want place stair at column number 5, and then the row is going to be just called row, just like you see here. So basically what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, our row number is 4, so place stair at column 5, row 4, and then it'll go back up to the beginning and say now the row is 5. So let's now place a stair at column 5, row 5. So you should get the same exact output as you had before. So what I want everyone to do is delete the previous 2 columns or the previous 2 lines of code that you had in this, and now replace it with a for loop. So your code should look exactly like this does on the board. Okay, so now we're going to start a new example. So I want you to delete everything in your main tab. Remember, we'll never even click on the shared code again. So in your main tab, delete everything except let portal equals, like that whole statement, okay? You want to leave that so that your puzzle world should now look exactly like this screenshot. So go ahead and delete absolutely everything from your main tab except for the portal statement. Now let's say that we want to create a row of single blocks, and we want the blocks at columns 0 through 9, row 1. What we are going to do is we are going to use a for loop that says for column in 0, 9, meaning we want the columns to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we want to place a block at whatever column we're at, row 1. So I want everyone to try to do this for loop with for column in 0 to 9, place a block at that column, row 1. So now we're going to try something a little more advanced. So we can actually put for loops inside of for loops. So what if we wanted a row of blocks that were 2 high at columns 0 through 9, row 1? Well, we already know how to place a single row right here with this for loop, but now we want to add this other for loop on the outside. So let me show you how that's done. If this is what our puzzle world looks like, and this is what it should look like, we want to go before our for and create a new space. So we're going to add another for loop. And I know they're separate, so just roll with me for just a moment. We're going to replace I with height. We want our height to go from 1 to 2. And where we have our code, I'm actually going to take this for loop here. If I click on the word for, I'll do it again. If I click on the word for, it highlights that whole thing. What's really cool is that now we're able to drag and drop this. So I can actually come and put it inside my for loop. And we don't need this word code anymore. So all I did was I can delete the word code. I'm going to click on this for column down here, and then I'm going to click and hold it to drag it inside the for loop. So now we have a for loop inside a for loop, and I'm going to change this to run fastest so that we can see it. We're going to see that now it has created a wall that is 2 blocks high. So I want everyone to try this on their own now. All right, at this point, you really have everything that you need to start creating your puzzle worlds. You know how to place blocks, you know how to place stairs, you know how to place gems. The last few things that we need to talk about are portals. Portals transport a player or the character from one place to another. So you can use the place portal function, just like it shows here. You'll have a start column and a start row because you need to have a point on your grid where your first portal is, where your character will start. And then you also have an end column and an end row. So then that's where your character is going to reappear. So if you have started using Learn to Code 1, you understand how the portals work. And you need to have 2 different portals in order for them to transport from one to the other. So let's show how this is going to work. So hopefully this is what your puzzle world looks like right now. And I'm just going to create a portal in the same exact puzzle world to show you guys an example. So this is where this statement, let portal equal portal color, comes into play. So I'm going to down here type PLA, and then I'm going to find place portal so that I don't have to type that all out. This first one that comes up is the item. For the item, it is going to be whatever the name of your portal is called. In this case, it's just called portal. If we were going to create many portals, maybe I want to call it green portal. Okay? It doesn't really matter what it's called, but these need to match. Whatever the item is needs to match the name of this one. So like for example, say we were going to create 2 portals. I would say let blue portal equal portal color. And then do you guys see this little box down here that just looks like a little gray square? If we click that, then we get to choose our color. And that's how that works. Okay? So now I have 2 different portals. So that means we're going to need to have 2 different place portal functions. So I have one where the item was green portal, and now this item is going to be blue portal. All right, so let's make the start column is going to be 0, 0. And then the end column is going to be 0, 1. Okay? And so then for the blue portal, I'm going to make the start column 1, 1, and I am going to make, or actually let's say I'm going to make the start column 9, 1, and then the end column is going to be 9, 9. So now I have no red dots, so I know it's going to run correctly. I'm going to push run fastest, and it's going to build my wall first, and then it's going to place my portals. So what would happen is that my character would go into this portal on the bottom left, and my character would reappear up here. And then I could go down this way, and I could go into this portal over here, and I would come out at this corner over here. And you can see that they're the colors that we picked out based on this up here. So that's how you create portals. Okay, the next thing that you have to do is place your character. So in order to have a puzzle world with a character to solve it, you need to use this statement right here. And I will give this to you on every assignment that I provide. And so all you would need to do is copy and paste that statement. So if I go back into Swift, I can say down here, world.place Hopper at coordinate column 9 row 0. And now if I push run fastest, it's always going to do things in order, so it'll build my walls first, it'll place my portals, and now you can see I have my character placed on my map. So the very last thing that we're going to have to do is we are going to have to move the character. So there are 4 different functions that I have given you here to move your character. You can move forward, turn left, turn right, and collect a gem. So in my map, we don't have any gems right now, but we can try to get him through the portals. And so I can say Hopper dot, and I'm going to turn it in the direction that Hopper's facing. So I want Hopper to turn right. So I'm actually going to use a for loop to move my character forward because I know he needs to move forward a lot of spaces. He needs to move forward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So for move in 1 to 9, I want to do Hopper dot move forward. Okay, so now let's run just to see where we're at. It's going to build out my puzzle world first. Hopper turns, moves forward, goes through the portal. So now I know that Hopper needs to turn around, and I can either turn left twice or turn right twice, or 1, 2, yep, 2 times. And now I need to do the same move thing that we just did. So I'm going to click 4, move in 1 to 9, Hopper dot move forward. Now let's see what happens. Builds the wall, Hopper turns right, moves forward 9 times, left, left, moves forward 9 times, and went through my portal and ended there. So if I had a gem, I would have to collect all of the gems in order to have the puzzle world solved. But now you can see we've placed portals, we've placed blocks, you know how to place stairs, we've used for loops, we've used for loops within for loops, we've placed the character, and we've moved the character around the puzzle world in order to try to solve it. So this is what you guys are going to be responsible for. So I encourage you guys to mess around with it. Imagine we didn't want this height to be 2, but we wanted it to be 20. We can see that it's going to build a wall that is 20 blocks high. And so there's a lot of room for you guys to be creative and have fun with the puzzle world. Like, you guys get to create it. It's literally a blank slate. So it keeps building and building and building and building. We can zoom out. And there it goes. Here comes Hopper. He looks really stretched out up there, doesn't he? And then he's down here again. Looks tired. All right. So now that you guys have played around with this, the next thing that you're going to do is the teacher is going to give you a practice assignment to practice building a puzzle world using the skills that you've learned.